police scoured the woods around the Everett's home, and the couple begged for their son's safe return.
He's just a young guy. He's our only child.
It wasn't easy to stand there and, you know, you want to scream through the screen, bring my son home. I look back on it now and I think evil. That's total evil. That is Satan walking. I wanted to leave and go beat him to death, handle it myself. Don't bother about arresting him. You send the undertaker.
When I opened the door into the boardroom and saw the FBI agents, I kind of held my breath a second and was like, oh my gosh, this is really happening. They're not believing me. They think I really have something to do with this. And was like, can I be framed here?
She said, do you believe McKay's alive? And I said, no. It was like a nightmare, almost like a movie, just insane. The look in Paulette's eyes were empty. When a part of your soul dies, you know it. It leaves. It leaves. There's an empty spot. You just find it really hard to wrap your head around a child being abducted and he's gone and you don't know if he's safe. You don't know if he's dead. The first Christmas that Paulette, Carl, and McKay came to my home, there was an instant bond with McKay and myself. McKay immediately sat in my lap and he looked at the tree and said, is all this for me? And most of it was. And from that day on, it was an instant bond. McKay came always in October. I'm going to tell you, we did nothing but play. We played all the time. We rode the four-wheeler, we fished, we picked blackberries, we cooked. He wanted to buy ice cream. He would eat ice cream out of the whole container in the recliner. There was no no's at my house. It was all yes, whatever you want to do, whatever you want to do. There's a dreaded phone call that you get late at night, and you know that there's something terribly wrong when you get that phone call. My first question is, what's wrong? My sister said McKay has been abducted. There was very little information given, and we didn't know at that point whether McKay was okay or not. And the next thing I remember is I just kind of dropped the phone. It was like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And I was crying one minute and trying to figure it out the next minute and praying the next minute. And it was that point in our life, the worst thing that had happened.
I have a girlfriend once that said, if in life you have the cutest house on the street and the cutest husband and the cutest kid and the cutest dog, look out, all hell's gonna break loose. Carl was much younger than myself. He was still in high school. I was in college. My sister was dating his friend, and they ended up at our house. And so that's how Carl and I met. I taught school, elementary school. A church associate introduced Carl to oil and gas. Within a short time, the oil and gas industry began to boom, and eventually we became very comfortable. We were married almost 12 years before McKay was born. We had figured maybe we could not have children. It was a difficult pregnancy. I almost died in childbirth, so we knew that McKay would be our only child. I was awestruck by the fact that we finally had a child. He was different. He would call me woman instead of mom, you know, and I remember he bumped heads with the dog and the dog nipped him, one of our dogs, and we had to get stitches for him. And I was just to tears. And he looked at me and he said, "Woman, don't cry for me." You know, you hear people say, well, that child's an old soul. And he was like that. And if I was having one of those days, he would go, well, let me get your purse because I know you're going to lay it down and you're not going to remember where you put it. We had an alarm system to turn the alarm on. And McKay knew, don't open the door. We knew he knew because several months before, someone's alarm went off and the sheriff's department had come out. And he wouldn't open the door for the sheriff to talk to the sheriff. He talked to him through the door. So, you know, he had been taught, don't open the door. I said goodbye to him. And then we left. When I looked back, I could see through the back door. It was a French door with just glass. And he was sitting in the chair watching, you know, television. Then he had his feet propped up on the ottoman, eating ice cream and enjoying himself. Happy, smiling, not a care in the world, you know. We go to the meeting and every 30 minutes, Carl calls home and checks on McKay, and McKay's fine. And we're at the restaurant for a while. We order, and then Carl gets up to try and call McKay. He comes back to the table and he tells me, I'm going to run home and check on McKay, and you can ride home with the neighbor. He didn't tell me anything. He just said, I'm going to go home, check on McKay. At that time, I just thought he was tired. He's going home. He's ready for that evening to end, and he's going to go take care of McKay. We have dessert, and then my neighbor goes to use the phone. And he comes back and he says, it's time for us to go. And I'm thinking, okay, it's time to go home. And so we're in the car riding along, and he tells me, Paulette, Carl's at home and he can't find McKay. You think, am I dreaming? You know, or did I hear that right? What do you do when someone tells you they can't find your child? I get home and Carl is in the front of the house on the front street. I have no idea what's happened. There's crime tape, and I look, and already there's fingerprint dust all over the door frame and everything. Carl told me when he got home, the door was ajar and the alarm system wasn't on. And he came in screaming for McKay, and as he came to the door, the phone started ringing. Carl told me that there had been a ransom demand. He said the person was female and had a raspy voice.
There was someone on the other line said they kidnapped my son.
Okay.
And they're demanding $500,000. They're going to call me in the morning at 8 o'clock if I want to see him alive and well again.
It seemed like slow motion that my body was moving, but everything around was happening so fast. I was so shocked. My body was feeling the most intense stress I'd ever felt in my entire life. What do you do? Get my child back. Where is McKay?
This is how I remember them. This is how I always want to remember them. The Everetts did lead a charmed life. They didn't need anything. They had each other, they had their child, they had their employment, they had their church. They had everything going for them. It was in 1987, I joined First Baptist Church, and Carl was head of the deacon body then. And that's when I first met them, and it was a long, enduring friendship from then. A couple of times they had out-of-town meetings, and I would go and spend the night and take care of McKay. But he was an easy child to care for. They did give me the key as well as the code to their security system, because I guess they felt I earned their trust, and they would take short trips, weekend trips, and would say, okay, we're going to be gone. Are you available? And I always was. So Wednesday morning, I'm at work, and the phone rings, I answer, and it's the school librarian. She was a friend from church as well. And she said, Ricky, we understand McKay has been kidnapped. I'm like, what are you talking about? She goes, well, that's what we have heard, and he is not in school today. I said, well, I'll see what I can find out, and I will call you back. Well, I first thought it was a joke. How could he be kidnapped? How could he be missing? Something in McKay's 12? But he's not a child that would hide or run away or play a mean joke on his parents. And then the president of the company came and got me and said, Ricky, someone is here to see you. I walk into the hallway and I said, well, where are they? And he goes, well, they're in the conference room. I said, they? He said, Ricky, the FBI is here to question you. I'm like, oh, okay. But why do they want to talk to me? When I opened the door, there wasn't one, there were several. Then they started asking the questions. Do you know why we're here? I'm like, well, I understand McKay is missing. Well, did you have anything to do with it? Well, no. More than once, they would say, just come clean. Just tell us, where is he? That's when I would get mad, and then all of a sudden I'm scared. They're not believing me. They think I really have something to do with this. And was like, oh my gosh, this is really happening. Can I be framed here? I was upset. I said, you're wasting a lot of time here. The person who has done something is roaming the streets still. Are they going after someone else's child? And they're like, well, you're our focus right now. I'm like, I have done nothing. And the last thing they asked me if I would be willing to do a polygraph. And I agreed to it.
When I arrived at Paulette and Carl's, it was total chaos. You're helpless. You don't know what to do. There's FBI all over the place. There's police. There's helicopters flying around. Just confusing. Just total chaos and confusion. Carl was an emotional wreck. I failed. I didn't protect my son against this evil. Now I need to bring him back home. I need to get him home. Paulette was a total mess. I was almost catatonic, could hardly speak, could hardly walk. And she started crying. The tears. And all I could do was just shake my head. And she said, he's gone. He's gone. McKay, what am I going to do? He's gone. We have to find McKay. I felt like when Paulette was so helpless that I had to hold it together. I was not to cry, and I was to say everything's going to be okay, everything's going to be fine, and that's what I had to do. I didn't sleep. I watched people. I watched who was in my house. I watched more and more law enforcement show up. And the clock ticked and the clock ticked. And then the FBI had the phones tapped. And they were there, ready to move. We waited and we waited and we waited. And it was a hollow, internal, hollow, cold feeling when that phone didn't ring. And in my mind, I'm thinking, this is not good. And I'm going, why don't you call? Well, there's a reason you don't call. Something went wrong. As the clock ticked, it was like the longer it goes when someone's not been recovered from an abduction, the less likely they are to come home. Where is he and who has him? I knew it had to be somebody. We met with the FBI profiler. We talked to him a good while because he was trying to profile the type person that would do this. And right off the bat, it was like, who do you know? And who would McKay open the door for? We had to list friends. It was almost surreal because you're thinking, I'm supposed to list the people I know, not possible strangers or barely acquaintances who would come to my door. They want to know about the people I know that could have McKay. Well, it's chilling. I was horrified to think that someone that we knew or that McKay knew and loved would have the gall to take him.
I was very humiliated to think that people who knew me would even fathom that I could harm a child. I have a hard time killing a cockroach. I would never harm a child. And I do know that the ransom caller had a raspy voice, so does my sister, and that I had a key. And someone said, well, you know, he does live on the east side and he probably did it for money. Stop. That is nuts. Those are remarks that I did hear. The polygraph test was bizarre. Where were you the night of the 12th? Can you get someone to verify you were there? Do you know where McKay is? Do you know anyone who would have harmed him? They'll ask a question, then there's a pause. It ended when he said, okay, I'm done. I said, well, what do you think? And he said, you've done nothing, get out. I went back to work, and of course people by then, I think the word had started spreading. I I just remember this one guy I worked with. He said, "Are you going to climb on top of the building and jump?" He was implying that I had done something and I was going to commit suicide to keep from going to prison. After work, Dad said, "Ricky, the FBI agents just left here." I was like, "Why?" He said, "Well, there were 6 of them. And they combed through our home and went into the barn, and they did walk from one end of our home to the other through the crawl space. They didn't have a search warrant. They just came and kind of pushed their way through." Once I was cleared by the FBI, the next morning, Carl sent word through a friend, "Ask Ricky to please come see me." So I went to see him and we went into his office. And that's when he said he was sorry. He said, "But Ricky, they're trying to find McKay." I said, I know. I know it's not about me. I know they're trying to find your child. It's not about me now. They needed to find the child.
Well, the FBI pretty much, they know their job. They know that a lot of times the people who abuse children or harm them are people they know and love. They're not strangers. Well, by this time, our neighbor had come forth and said I was putting out the trash and this car nearly backed over me. And this is what the car looked like. And he described the car and it had an emblem on the back. And he didn't know who the car belonged to, but it was gold, goldish color. Initially, when we met Hilton and his wife and their 2 sons, they seemed like just the average family. The kids played Little League. Hilton coached Little League. Hilton Crawford had prior experience working in law enforcement, and he was in the security business and worked for a security firm. McKay called Hilton Uncle Hilty, in the South, just as a gesture. Sometimes kids will say, "Oh, that's like my uncle, Uncle Hilty." At some point, Hilton did approach us to go into business with him. He calls Carl and he wants Carl to invest in the restaurant business with him and be a partner. And he tells Carl that he would need to say our financial statement for us to be a partner. And I said, "I don't know anything about the restaurant business. And so I don't want to do anything with that." And I told Carl, I said, "Don't ever release our financial statement to anyone." I didn't know, but Carl released our financials to Hilton. I live every day knowing that Hilton Crawford had a bird's eye view of what a ransom demand could be or not be. I got a call at 5 o'clock, and it was Hilton wanting to know if I was going to attend the meeting. But it didn't make sense. It does now. He was tracking where we were going to be and where was McKay vulnerable, is what he was doing. It almost didn't seem real. And it was like someone had hit me in the gut. How does someone go from that mindset that I'm going to be kind to kids to be a monster? Just a total evil being. Did you really think you could succeed? Did you really think this would work? It was devastating. I wanted to leave and go meet him to death. Handle it myself. Let me save us time at the courthouse. don't bother about arresting him. Send the undertaker.
The time waiting for some answers was excruciating. It was long. It seemed like months would go by and it would be maybe hours. I believe that Carl had a lot of hope that McKay was still alive. I don't think Paulette was processing all of it. She was not good. I felt that the worst had happened and that McKay was gone. However, I didn't share it with Paulette. Maybe I felt like it was allowing them one more peaceful day until the final word came. But Paulette said, "Do you believe McKay's alive?" And I said, "No." The look in Paulette's eyes were empty. It was an emptiness that I guess nobody feels until they've lost part of their soul. When a part of your soul dies, you know it. It leaves. It leaves. There's an empty spot.
They started zeroing in on Hilton and watching his behaviors. They discovered that he was in financial distress, but he also had extensive gambling debt, and he did not have the money to repay them. And the FBI went and found the cleaners that Hilton Crawford used, and there was a shirt there that looked like blood splatters on it. All the roads led to him.
Authorities arrested 56-year-old Hilton Crawford, a longtime family friend known as Uncle Hilty to young McKay.
He gave very little information. You know, he's blame shifting to a Remington. He's only admitting that he took McKay and that he did not act alone. The woman that made the ransom demand phone call was Irene Flores. She was working for Hilton through the security company. I don't really care at that point who did what. I just want to know where McKay is. The FBI had run out of leads. They didn't know where else to look or who else to talk to. Carl came to me and said, "I want you to go to Hilton Crawford's wife, and I want you to tell her that she is to take her 2 sons to the jail, and she is to not leave until Hilton Crawford draws a map of where McKay is." I think they were hoping that maybe if Hilton Crawford had to face his wife and his 2 children, that would stir him to a point of drawing a map. Because at that time, the FBI felt certain that Hilton knew where McKay was located. And I can assure you, they were running out of options. So we drove out there, and Hilton's wife came out. And I said, "I need you to take your 2 sons and go to the jail and ask to visit with Hilton." And I said, "You ask him to draw a map of where McKay is located." And I said, "Don't leave without that map." She just looked at me. And I said, "I need to go home." I'm under the maximum amount of stress I could be under. My body was shutting down, and that my body was on total overload. I've never felt so stressed in my life. And so I lay down and I dozed off to sleep. And then about 2 o'clock on Sunday morning, Carl woke me up and I looked around. And Carl was leaning beside the bed and he said, "Polly, I'm sorry. I wasn't big enough to get McKay home. McKay's gone. McKay's dead." It was like just everything stopped. I tried to move, I couldn't. I tried to speak, I couldn't. And my mind was racing, and I told myself, "You've been in a car accident and you've been in a coma and you're coming out of the coma." I was creating a scenario, a storyline that I could live with. And then I told myself, "Don't do that. That's not true. McKay's gone. McKay's dead." At that time, Hilton kept declaring that he did not act alone. But R.L. Remington, the authorities never found. We think that that was just a fabrication. The FBI, as best they could explain it at that time, once Hilton Crawford cleared that McKay was going to be home alone, that he showed up and that he told McKay that Carl and I were hurt. And the FBI thinks that that's why McKay unarmed the alarm system, opened the door. But somewhere along the way, Hilton said McKay was put in the trunk of the car. There's signs in the trunk that McKay was struggling to get out. At some point, Hilton, we think, bludgeoned McKay with a large flashlight because there was an indention and you could lay a large flashlight in it and it was like a perfect match. Then they went out into the swamp in Louisiana. McKay was drug like a sack of fertilizer across the ground, across the weeds, and then he was shot. People say McKay was abducted and murdered. Well, there's a word in the middle. McKay was abducted, tortured, and murdered. This was not a painless ordeal at all. Can you imagine the emotional damage to a child being treated like that? I look back on it now and I think, evil. That's total evil. That is Satan walking.
There was a day in court that they were testifying to McKay what he had done in the trunk of the car, and that he had been taking the gaskets, removing the gaskets from the trunk, and that if he had had 10 more minutes, that he could have escaped. And it was like out of nowhere, Paulette started. She's just like screaming, "No, no, no."
The details were more than Paulette could bear. Her screams filled the courtroom.
She realized the magnitude of what McKay was going through and that he probably was scared to death. It was like a nightmare. Almost like a movie, just insane. For the remainder of the trial, Carl and I went to court every day, and Paulette stayed at home and we gave her a report every night. It's a battle between good and evil every day, and evil won that battle. Not the war, but that battle. Paulette and Carl's life began to fall apart after McKay's death. I don't know whether it was this sense of they felt guilty because their son was gone, but it made me sad. I cried. I cried a lot because Carl would forever be McKay's dad, and Paulette is forever McKay's mom. And to me, they belong together. But the battles that you fight, the internal turmoil that goes on when you lose a child is it's different for everybody. You feel guilt, you feel anger, you feel bitter. It just made them grow apart. And McKay was the glue that held them together for so many years. And a good glue.
No, I feel that Carl died from really a broken heart that never healed from losing that boy. There was just so many things that he did for me, plus many others, and then he was still so broken from not having his child. You could tell he was never the same. He was very sad. Hilton was evil. To take someone's only 12-year-old child, he would have to be evil to do what he did. He took everything from the Everetts. It was hurtful to have something so tragic pointed at you. It affected me. I went to work, but I came home because I didn't want people talking to me about it. I wanted it to kind of just go away, but something that's that big, it takes a while. The anger portion did not last a long time because, again, as a Christian, you have to forgive that. I've always said it's important that I help Paulette in any way that I can help her to heal from this. And I am glad that we are still friends. Some people would say, how can you still be friends with her? She didn't accuse me. She's the one who lost her only treasure in life, her only child. I need to be there for her to help her continue to walk and heal from this. Because I think the rest of her long-lived life, it will be a healing process.
When I requested everything from the district attorney's office, they told me, we don't think you want that. And I knew my spirit is not one of weakness. And so I dug into that box and I opened those envelopes and I looked at the photos of McKay's remains. The horrific brutality that I saw in those photos of what had happened to McKay, what he had endured, that became my North Star to move forward. I chose that what I went through would make me strong, not break me. I know why I do what I do. You look at those photos and you would understand that what it made me strong. It didn't destroy me. It gave me the courage that I needed. For years, I thought I would not go to the execution. But as the date grew closer and closer, I became much more open to being there. And so I made a decision that I would go. In the moment of the execution, he just asked, to be forgiven. But he never admitted ever, ever, ever to killing McKay. And I am of the opinion that to receive forgiveness from God, you have to own the sin. If you don't own it, then how do you get forgiveness? And then they pronounced him dead. And I was like, it's over. This part's over. Now, my part of grieving McKay and missing him and wishing I could hear him bang on the piano and run through the house and slam the door coming in and out, those days will never come again. They're gone. But he's not going to hurt anyone else. And that was important to me, that evil be stopped.
The morning sun bled pale light over the quiet streets of Palm County, Florida. It was March 14th, 1998, the kind of humid dawn that clings to your skin and makes every breath feel heavy. In a small neighborhood just outside Jacksonville, a jogger found what she first thought was a mannequin in the ditch, pale, motionless, half covered by a torn bedsheet. But when she stepped closer, her scream shattered the stillness of the morning. It wasn't a mannequin. It was a woman. The body was that of 22-year-old Allison Parker, a college student, part-time waitress, and by all accounts, the type of girl everyone liked: polite, funny, a little shy. Her friends said she'd gone missing after her shift at the diner the night before. She never made it home. Police arrived within minutes. They cordoned off the area, flashes of red and blue cutting through the mist. A crowd gathered behind the yellow tape neighbors, whispering reporters pressing close the jogger trembling beside a patrol car. Detectives moved fast, but what they found only deepened the mystery. Allison's shoes were missing. Her car keys lay 10 feet from her body, her phone gone. And though her clothes were torn, there were no signs of robbery. Whoever did this wasn't after money. They were after something else. Detective Mark Ellison, a veteran with 15 years in homicide, crouched beside the ditch and stared at the girl's face. "It's too clean," he muttered. "Too deliberate. There were no tire marks, no footprints, just a faint scent like gasoline drifting on the wind. Whoever killed her had planned it, executed it, and left without a trace." Within hours, the investigation consumed the county. Flyers went up. The local paper screamed the headline, "Young woman found dead off county road, police seek leads." Every lead led nowhere. Her boyfriend, Ryan Hale, was the first suspect. He had an alibi, friends, coworkers, even a time-stamped photo at a bar downtown. He broke down crying during questioning. "She texted me goodnight," he said, voice shaking. "I thought she was home safe." Detectives turned to the diner where Allison worked. Customers remembered her laughing behind the counter around 10 p.m. A coworker said she left in her green Honda, waving goodbye. No one saw her again. The security camera outside the diner had stopped working 2 weeks earlier. No footage, no witnesses, nothing. By week's end, the autopsy came back, cause of death strangulation. No defensive wounds, no sexual assault, no clear motive. But one clue caught attention: faint skin cells under her fingernails. The forensic team collected them, logged them, and ran them through the state DNA database. No matches. Not in 1998. The case went cold. Weeks turned into months. Leads dried up. Reporters stopped calling. Allison's parents moved away, unable to bear driving past the road where she died. Detective Ellison kept the file on his desk longer than he should have, reopening it every few weeks, rereading the same pages. It haunted him, the way the girl's face looked peaceful, almost staged, like someone wanted to tell a story but stopped halfway through. Years passed. Technology changed. DNA testing improved, databases expanded, and old cases began to wake from their slumber. But Allison Parker's file stayed buried in the archives, gathering dust among hundreds of other unsolved murders, until January 2023. A new forensic unit was launched in the county, a cold case task force armed with modern DNA sequencing tools. They started with unsolved homicides from the 1990s. When they pulled the Parker file, the technician Samantha Lowe noticed something odd. The original sample from Allison's fingernails had been preserved unusually well. Perfect for reanalysis. She submitted it to a private lab in Virginia using a technology that didn't exist back then, forensic genetic genealogy. The results came back 4 weeks later, and they changed everything. The lab found a partial DNA match, not a direct hit, but a familial link to a man who had submitted his genetic data to an ancestry website. His name, Eric Dalton, age 42, living in Tampa. He wasn't a suspect, but his DNA indicated he was likely a cousin of whoever had touched Allison Parker the night she died. The task force started digging. They built a family tree, dozens of names, addresses, generations. One name jumped out: Michael Dalton, Eric's older cousin, last known address in Jacksonville in 1998, a construction worker, no criminal record, moved out of state in 2000. Detective Lowe requested his DNA through a warrant. The sample was tested. When the results came back, it was like lightning striking 25 years of silence. Full match: Michael Dalton, age 54, living quietly in a suburb of Nashville, Tennessee. For 2.5 decades, he had built a life, remarried, had kids, coached Little League. Neighbors described him as friendly, reliable, the guy who helped fix your porch when no one else would. No one suspected that behind that calm smile was a man who once strangled a young woman on a dark Florida road and thought he'd gotten away with it forever. The arrest came on a Tuesday morning, 6:15. M. Dalton was pouring coffee in his kitchen when he saw red and blue lights outside his window. Officers surrounded the house. His wife screamed when they read the warrant. Dalton didn't resist. He just said quietly, "It was a long time ago." As they drove him away, Detective Lowe watched from the side of the street. She had read every page of the file, seen every photograph, memorized every line of the report. He thought time would erase it, she said. But DNA doesn't forget. At the sheriff's office, investigators reopened the evidence box from 1998. The photos, the samples, the yellowed notes written in Ellison's handwriting. The ghost of a case long buried was alive again. When Dalton faced questioning, he barely spoke. He asked for a lawyer, then sat in silence. Hours passed. Detectives replayed the evidence, the DNA, the timeline, the inconsistencies. His eyes stayed fixed on the table. But when they mentioned Allison's name, his hands began to tremble. Why her, one detective asked. Why that night? Dalton whispered something barely audible. She was just there. It wasn't a confession, but it was enough. When the news broke, the headlines spread like wildfire. Florida 1998 cold case solved DNA match stuns investigators. Neighbors who'd lived through the fear of that year stood in shock. Allison's mother, now gray-haired and frail, cried as she watched the broadcast. "I didn't think I'd live to see this day," she said. "I just wanted to know who." Detective Ellison, now retired, got the call that evening. He sat in his armchair staring at the framed photo of the caseboard that had haunted him for years. "It's over," Luva told him. "We found him." But for Ellison, it didn't feel over. "These things never end," he said softly. "They just stop echoing for a while." Because in Palm County, the road where Allison was found still looks the same. The grass has grown back, the ditch has filled in. But if you stand there at dawn, you can still hear the hum of the highway, the distant siren, the echo of that first scream that shattered the morning calm 27 years ago. And though justice has finally arrived, the air still feels heavy, like the memory of something that refuses to fade. In the interrogation room, the air was cold enough to make breath visible. A fluorescent light hummed above the metal table, flickering every few seconds, like a heartbeat, refusing to stop. Michael Dalton sat there, wrists cuffed, face pale. Two detectives watched him from across the table, Loa and Ramirez, partners in the cold case task force. Neither spoke for the first few minutes. They wanted the silence to work on him. Silence can be louder than any question. Dalton kept his gaze low fixed on the small red recording light. He didn't ask why he was there. He didn't ask for water. He just waited still as stone. When Luva finally leaned forward, her voice was calm, deliberate. "Do you know why we're talking to you, Michael?" A pause, then a slow, shallow breath. "I think you do," he said. The room tightened. Lowe slid a photo across the table, a grainy print of Allison Parker's smiling hair, pulled back name tag, still visible from the diner. Dalton stared at it for a long time. "She was a nice girl," he muttered. "Nice girls don't end up dead on the side of the road," Ramirez said. Dalton's jaw clenched. His knuckles turned white. For a brief second, something flickered in his eyes, anger, regret, recognition. Then it was gone. Lova placed another photo beside the first. The ditch, the sheet, the marks around Allison's neck. "You did this," she said, not as an accusation, but as a fact, a truth spoken aloud after 25 years of silence. Dalton closed his eyes. "You think you know everything," he whispered. "You don't." Outside the room, cameras flashed. News crews camped outside the sheriff's office. Reporters shouted questions into microphones. How did investigators find him? What led to the arrest? Why now the words DNA breakthrough and ancestry database repeated on every network? Inside, the clock ticked past midnight. Dalton's lawyer arrived and ended the interview. No confession, no explanation, just silence. But investigators didn't need his words, they had his DNA. And DNA, unlike people, doesn't lie. When the task force returned to the evidence lab, the team pulled up the sequencing data. The match was perfect, 99.99% probability. The sample from Allison's fingernails belonged to Michael Dalton. It wasn't circumstantial. It was science. Still, Lowe wanted more. Motive, connection. Why her? Dalton and Allison had never been linked publicly, but when detectives dug into old employment records, a name surfaced: Dalton Construction, a small company that had done repair work on the diner's parking lot in February 1998, just a month before Allison's death. Dalton had been the site supervisor. He'd seen her, maybe spoken to her, maybe more. The pieces began to align, but not neatly. Witnesses from that time remembered a man watching Allison from his truck during her shifts. No one had thought much of it back then. He was just one of the workers, a waitress recalled. He smiled a lot. Too much, maybe. In 1998, no one noticed the shadows watching. Now, 27 years later, those shadows were finally being dragged into the light. Dalton's home in Tennessee was searched. Investigators combed through every drawer, every photo album, every trace of his past. In the basement, they found an old box, weathered, taped shut, covered in dust. Inside were newspaper clippings, some yellowed with age. One headline read, "Murder of Local Woman Baffles Police." Another, "No Leads in Palm County Homicide." He had kept them, all of them. Lova stared at the clippings in disbelief. "He wanted to remember," she said quietly, or maybe he wanted to make sure no one else ever forgot. Among the papers, they found a single Polaroid, a stretch of the county road, the same road where Allison had been found. On the back, in faded ink, were 3 words. She stopped running. It wasn't just evidence, it was obsession. Back in Florida, the discovery sent shockwaves through the department. Ellison, the retired detective, came in voluntarily to look through the new evidence. When he saw the Polaroid, he froze. "That's his handwriting," he said. "I saw that name on a maintenance form in '98. We just never followed it." That night, he sat alone in his car outside the sheriff's office, the rain streaking down the windshield. "We missed him," he whispered. "He was right there." The next morning, the district attorney announced they would seek a full murder charge. The community that had buried Allison 2 decades earlier gathered again, this time outside the courthouse. Some brought flowers. Others just stood in silence, watching as Dalton was escorted inside. Cameras clicked. Reporters shouted. He didn't flinch. But inside the courtroom, when the prosecutor read the charges, Dalton looked up, and for the first time, something cracked in his expression. It wasn't guilt, it was fear. Fear of the story finally catching up to him. Meanwhile, the forensic team kept digging. They re-examined every fiber, every trace, every overlooked detail from the 1998 crime scene. New technology could pull data from what once seemed useless, microscopic traces of soil plant pollen, even insect fragments. A forensic botanist identified particles on Allison's clothing that didn't match the roadside area where she was found. They matched another location, a field near an abandoned storage lot 5 miles away. Dalton's construction company had worked there too. The theory shifted Allison wasn't killed where she was found. She had been taken elsewhere. The ditch was just a dump site. Detective Lowe drove out to the field with the crime scene team. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the weeds. The lot was empty, silent except for the rustle of grass in the wind. Lowe stood in the same spot the botanist had marked on the map. The soil was dry cracked, but when she knelt, she could still see faint tire impressions hardened into the dirt, preserved by time. "This is where it happened," she said. They found fragments of rope embedded in the ground consistent with the fibers on Allison's wrists, a piece of torn cloth matching the diner's uniform. 27 years of silence, and the earth itself was finally talking. When Lowe returned to the station that night, she sat in the evidence room surrounded by open files and photographs. On the wall was a timeline of Allison's final hours, every minute reconstructed, every mile retraced. But one gap remained the missing 30 minutes between the diner and the ditch. Dalton had filled that silence with lies. Now the evidence would fill it with truth. In his second interrogation, Dalton broke, not in anger, not in confession, but in exhaustion. His voice cracked when he finally spoke. "It wasn't supposed to happen like that," he said. "What was supposed to happen?" Lou pressed. He stared at the photo again, Allison's smiling face frozen in time. She said, "No," he whispered. "I lost control." The room fell silent. The hum of the fluorescent light seemed deafening. Lowe leaned closer, and after, Dalton's eyes glistened just for a second. "I thought if no one found me, maybe God didn't see it either." He looked away, and the words hung there, fragile, hollow, final. Outside, the news spread fast. The community that had been haunted for decades finally had an answer, but it didn't feel like closure. It felt like a wound reopening after too many years of pretending it had healed. At Allison's old high school, someone placed her photo in the hallway again, framed with fresh flowers. Beneath it, a small card read, "Justice delayed is not justice denied." And in the sheriff's office, Detective Lowe stood before the board one last time. She ran her hand over the word "solved," written in red marker. But the look in her eyes wasn't triumph. It was fatigue, the kind that comes when the truth at last stops hiding. Because in the world of cold cases, victory never feels clean. It feels like breathing underwater relief and suffocation at once. And though the file is closed, the echoes of that night in 1998 still whisper through the humid Florida air. The road remains the same, the memory unburied. The silence finally broken. The jail cell was colder than he expected. Concrete walls, no clock, no window, only the low hum of fluorescent light that never turned off. Michael Dalton sat on the edge of his cot staring at the gray floor. He'd been there for 3 nights. Sleep came in fragments, 10 minutes here, 15 there, but the dreams were always the same. A road, headlights, a scream swallowed by darkness. In the hallway, the sound of footsteps echoed, correctional officers moving with routine precision. To them, Dalton was just another inmate. But to the world outside, he had become a headline. Florida 1998 cold case solved DNA match stuns investigators. His mugshot was everywhere. Local news, national outlets, even crime podcasts dissecting every word of the police press release. The public had their villain now. Inside the sheriff's office, Detective Lowe watched the chaos unfold on television screens in the operations room. She didn't care for the media circus, but she knew how much it mattered. Public attention meant funding, pressure, momentum. And in a case, this old momentum was everything. Across the table, DA Stephen Harris flipped through the files. "We've got DNA, a timeline motive implied by his own words," he said. "But we need to close every gap. The defense will play the time card. 2.5 decades, they'll question every piece of evidence." Lowe nodded. "We can close those gaps." She was determined, but something inside her felt uneasy. This wasn't just about proof anymore. It was about ghosts, and what chasing them for too long could do to a person. The prosecution team reconstructed every moment of that night again and again. They built maps, timelines, even 3D models of the diner, the field, the road. Every variable had to fit, every second accounted for. Meanwhile, Dalton's attorney filed motions for suppression. He claimed the DNA collection violated privacy. that the ancestry match was a modern overreach of state power. But the law was on the task force's side. Familial DNA had cracked dozens of cold cases across the country. And in this one, the science was unshakable. Still, something about Dalton troubled Loa. He wasn't like the others. She'd seen no bravado, no denial, no self-pity. Just quiet. Too quiet. When she'd interrogated him, she'd seen flickers of something deeper, not just guilt, but resignation, as if he'd been waiting for this moment his entire life. In his cell, Dalton received a visitor, his wife, Linda. She looked smaller than he remembered. Her eyes red-rimmed, clutching the phone behind the glass. "They're saying things on TV," she whispered. "Tell me it's not true." He couldn't. Her hands trembled. "Michael, our kids. What am I supposed to tell them?" Dalton's jaw tightened. He stared past her eyes, fixed on a point that wasn't there. Finally, he said, "Tell them their father made a mistake he can't undo." She started crying, shaking her head. "A mistake? You killed someone." The guard tapped the glass. Time was up. When she left, he didn't move. The hallway lights flickered again, humming like static in his ears. He thought of Allison, the sound of her voice that night, the way she said no, the moment his hands closed around her throat. He had told himself for years that it wasn't him, that it was someone else, a shadow version, a stranger born in a fit of anger. But sitting there now, there were no strangers left to blame. Back at headquarters, Lowe met with Dr. Ellis, a forensic psychologist brought in to profile Dalton for trial. He'd read every transcript, every report, every note. "He's not a serial offender," Ellis said. "He's a control type. One act of dominance, spontaneous but rehearsed in his mind. Then, suppression decades of pretending it never happened. These men often live perfectly ordinary lives afterward." Lova frowned, "until the past catches up." "Exactly," Ellis said. "He's been rehearsing normalcy for 25 years. Now that it's gone, watch how fast he unravels." And unravel he did. Guards reported that Dalton had stopped eating full meals. He paced his cell at night, mumbling to himself, scratching words into the paint words they couldn't make out. When they repainted the wall, he did it again, over and over. One morning, when the guard brought breakfast, he found a phrase etched deep into the concrete. She stopped running. The same words from the Polaroid. Lowe stared at the photo of the inscription when it arrived at her desk. "He's stuck in the loop," she said. "He's reliving it." Meanwhile, the DA's office prepared for pre-trial hearings. The community packed the courthouse steps every day. Some carried candles, some carried signs with Allison's name. Her mother, frail but determined, attended every session. She never looked at Dalton, not once. In interviews, she spoke quietly. "People talk about closure," she said. "There's no such thing. You don't close the hole where your child used to be. You just learn to walk around it." The prosecution unveiled the reconstructed sequence of the murder, a chilling timeline built from digital simulations, forensic mapping, and Dalton's own words. As the animation played in the courtroom showing Allison's final moments, reporters described a wave of silence that filled the room. Dalton didn't look at the screen. He just stared at his hands. That night, Lova went home and couldn't sleep. She opened the case file again, flipping through the photos until she found one that never made the official report, Allison's college ID recovered from the field. Her eyes in the photo were bright, determined, alive. Lowe felt something twist in her chest. "You deserved more," she whispered. Across town, in a cell lit by flickering light, Dalton pressed his palms to the wall. He whispered to the darkness, "I see her face every night." No one answered. Weeks later, a storm rolled across Palm County. Lightning cracked the sky, rain hammering the courthouse roof. Jury selection was underway. Reporters huddled under umbrellas, broadcasting live. After 27 years, one anchor said, "Justice may finally have its day." Inside, the defense argued diminished responsibility, stress, suppressed trauma, a psychotic break. The prosecution countered with cold precision, premeditation, opportunity control. Then came the moment that changed the tone of the trial completely. Lowe discovered a forgotten cassette tape in the original evidence box, mislabeled, buried under outdated reports. When played, it contained the 1998 interview of a witness who had been ignored back then, a truck driver who saw a green Honda parked by the roadside the night of the murder. He'd described a man standing beside it, talking to a young woman who seemed upset. His statement had been dismissed, the tape mislabeled as unrelated. When the audio played in court, the courtroom froze. The driver's voice crackled through the speakers. She was crying. He kept saying something like, "You don't walk away from me." Then I drove past, and that's all I saw. The prosecutor turned to the jury. He was there. He said those words. Dalton's composure finally cracked. His shoulders slumped, and for the first time since his arrest, his mask slipped. In the gallery, Allison's mother wept silently. Lowe, watching from the back row, felt the weight of years collapsing into one moment. After the hearing, reporters flooded the steps. Microphones everywhere. Detective Lowe, how does it feel knowing this could have been solved in 1998? She hesitated. Then, steady voice. We don't choose when truth surfaces. We just make sure it never sinks again. That night, rain still pounding against her windshield, she drove to the road where it all began. The ditch was overgrown now, wild grass hiding the scars of the past. She stepped out, the air thick with humidity and the scent of wet soil. For a long time, she stood there in silence. In the distance, thunder rolled a low, endless echo like the sound of something buried trying to speak. And for the first time since the arrest, Lova realized that justice isn't the end of a story. It's just where the pain learns to change shape. The courtroom smelled faintly of old wood and rain. Reporters filled every bench, cameras waiting like predators for a glimpse of blood. Michael Dalton was led in wearing a plain gray suit. He'd lost weight. His hands shook slightly as he sat down, but his eyes stayed fixed on the judge. Outside, thunder rolled across the Florida sky, the storm that had followed this case from the start refusing to leave. Detective Lowe watched from the second row, notebook in hand. She had spent months preparing for this day, but seeing him there, so ordinary, so human, made her chest tighten. Monsters never look like monsters when the lights are on. The prosecution began with the science. Charts, timelines, forensic slides glowing on a screen. The DNA was the spine of their story cells, scraped from the victim's nails, preserved for 27 years, matching Dalton at 99.99% probability. The jurors leaned forward. The words genetic genealogy and familial match hung in the air like weapons. The defense countered with doubt, chain of custody, contamination, time decay. They spoke of the illusion of certainty in modern science. The lawyer's voice was smooth, rehearsed, confident. But every time he looked at Dalton, he saw a man unraveling. Dalton's fingers twitched on the table. He whispered to himself, barely audible. She stopped running. The court reporter glanced up uneasy. Then came the witnesses. The former waitress from the diner, older now, voice trembling. He used to sit in the parking lot, she said. He'd watch us close up. Sometimes he'd wave at Allison when she walked to her car. The defense objected, speculative, irrelevant, overruled. Next, the truck driver, whose forgotten tape had resurfaced. His voice carried the weight of years of silence. I didn't think it mattered back then, he said, but I never forgot her face, or his. Every word landed like a hammer. Dalton avoided their eyes, but the jurors watched him closely. The hollow stare, the slow breathing, the slight tremor whenever Allison's name was spoken. When the prosecution rested, the defense called a psychologist to testify about Dalton's latent dissociative disorder. They described a man crushed by guilt and repression, incapable of understanding his own violence. It was clinical, sterile, almost sympathetic. But then the prosecutor stood, walked to the projector, and placed one photograph on the screen, the Polaroid from Dalton's basement, the road, the handwritten words. She stopped running. No sound in the room. Even the rain seemed to hold its breath. Is that dissociation, Doctor, the prosecutor asked, or is that memory? The witness faltered. I can't speak to intent. Then I will, the prosecutor said. Intent is keeping a photograph of your crime for 27 years? Dalton's composure cracked. He slammed his palm on the table. You don't know what happened, he shouted. The bailiff moved forward, but the judge raised a hand. Mr. Dalton, the judge warned you will remain silent. Dalton's voice trembled. She came to me. She wanted... He stopped himself, the sentence dying midair. Every camera in the room clicked at once. Lowe's pen froze above her notes. For the first time, the jury had seen it, the glimpse of rage hiding beneath his calm. When court adjourned, reporters swarmed the steps. Headlines appeared within hours. Dalton outburst stuns courtroom. Cold case killer snaps under pressure. That night in his cell, Dalton sat in darkness. The guards said he didn't move for hours. When they checked on him near dawn, he was still sitting, whispering the same words again and again. She stopped running. She stopped running. The next morning, the prosecution introduced something new phone tower data reconstructed from obsolete records. It placed Dalton's pager signal within 2 miles of the diner at 10:42 p.m. The defense objected, claiming the data was unreliable. The judge allowed it. The jurors saw the map red dots pulsing like heartbeats along the highway, Dalton's path traced in static, frozen in time. Lowe watched expression unreadable. She knew evidence alone wouldn't heal the wound this case had left, but truth has its own gravity. It pulls everything toward it, slowly, relentlessly. During recess, Allison's mother approached Lowe in the corridor. Her voice was barely above a whisper. When this ends, she said, don't let them call it closure. It's not that. It's just less empty. Lowe nodded. Yes, ma'am. Less empty. Inside the courtroom, the defense took its last gamble, Dalton himself on the stand. The lawyer's plan was simple: humanize him, show remorse, cast doubt. Dalton looked fragile as he rose. His voice was low, hesitant. I didn't plan anything he said. I was drunk, angry. I wanted to talk. She got scared. He paused, swallowing hard. I never meant to kill her. The prosecutor stood. Mr. Dalton, you said you wanted to talk. Why bring rope? Silence. You kept that rope in your truck for work, didn't you? Yes. Yet forensic analysis found fibers identical to that rope on her wrists. So you worked with it. You planned it. Dalton's mouth opened, then closed. The room felt smaller air, thickening like fog. The prosecutor's voice dropped to a whisper. When you strangled her, what did she say? Dalton stared at the table. His lips moved, barely audible. She stopped running. The words hung there, raw and final. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. The prosecutor stepped back. No further questions. When the session ended, the jurors looked shaken. Reporters outside already knew what tomorrow's headline would be. That night, Lowe drove to the pier overlooking the dark water. The storm had passed, but the sky still glowed with distant lightning. She recorded her notes into a small voice recorder habit she'd picked up years ago. He's not a mystery anymore, she said softly. He's just a man who thought silence was safety, but silence remembers everything. The next morning, final arguments began. The prosecutor's words cut clean. Justice is patient. It waits through decades. It sits in dust and silence until someone listens again. Today, you are the ones listening. The defense spoke of time decay, doubt, but their words sounded hollow against the weight of what everyone had already seen. When the jury retired to deliberate, the courthouse fell still. Minutes stretched into hours. Rain began again, soft this time, steady, endless. Lowe sat in the hallway watching drops trace patterns on the windows. She wasn't praying for a verdict. She was waiting for an ending that might never feel like one. After 7 hours, the bell rang. The jury was ready. Everyone stood as they filed in. The foreman's hands trembled slightly as he unfolded the paper. On the charge of first-degree murder of Allison Parker, a pause that seemed to last a lifetime. We find the defendant Michael Dalton guilty. A collective exhale filled the room. Reporters surged forward. Allison's mother covered her face, shoulders shaking. Dalton didn't move, not a word. Just a single tear sliding down his cheek, disappearing into the collar of his prison shirt. The judge thanked the jury. The gavel fell. Outside, cameras flashed like lightning. Headlines raced across every network. Florida cold case ends in conviction. DNA delivers justice after 27 years. But inside the courthouse, Lowe stayed behind, staring at the empty witness stand. The silence felt heavier than before, as if the walls themselves remembered. Justice had spoken. But ghosts don't vanish with verdicts. They linger in the soil and the echoes, in the spaces between words left unsaid. And as the storm clouds drifted out to sea, Palm County exhaled for the first time in 27 years. Not in relief, just in acknowledgement that the past at last had been heard. The courtroom emptied long before midnight, but the echo of the verdict clung to the walls like smoke. Outside camera crews packed up their tripods, reporters rehearsed their closing lines, and the crowd dissolved into the wet Florida night. Only the sound of rain remained steady, unrelenting like the case itself, refusing to go quiet. In the holding cell below the courthouse, Michael Dalton sat alone. The cuffs were gone now, replaced by a thick leather belt and the silence that follows judgment. A deputy slid a tray of food through the slot. Dalton didn't touch it. He stared at the wall lips, moving without sound, as if replaying a conversation no one else could hear. Upstairs, Detective Lowe gathered the final evidence boxes, years of paper photos and tagged bags that had defined her every waking hour. She stacked them, one by one, careful, reverent, almost reluctant. When she reached the last box, the one labeled Parker A., she hesitated. Her reflection looked back at her from the plastic lid. She whispered, "It's done." But it didn't feel done. Dalton's transfer to state prison happened 3 days later. The morning was gray, the sky heavy with low clouds. Reporters shouted questions through the fence. "Do you feel remorse? What would you say to Allison's family?" Dalton kept his head down, shackles clinking as he stepped into the van. The door slammed shut with a hollow clang. Inside, the prison routine swallowed him whole counts meals, lights out, days blurred. He refused visits. Even his wife stopped coming. But the chaplain said Dalton asked for a Bible and sat reading it for hours, turning the same pages until the ink wore thin. Weeks later, a guard found a torn page tucked into his blanket. Psalm 32 underlined, "Twice when I kept silent, my bones wasted away." Back in Palm County, the town tried to breathe again. The diner where Allison had worked reopened under new ownership. Someone hung a framed photo of her near the counter, smiling apron, crisp eyes alive. Customers left notes beneath it. "You're not forgotten." Justice came. Rest easy. But not everyone could rest. Allison's mother, Marjorie Parker, sat in her living room, surrounded by silence. The phone calls had stopped, the reporters moved on, and the house that once felt too small now felt like an ocean. Every night she lit a single candle on the windowsill. For her, she told neighbors. But deep down, she wasn't sure who it was for anymore, her daughter or the part of herself that vanished in 1998. Detective Lowe visited once months after the verdict. They sat at the kitchen table with cups of cold tea between them. Marjorie's hands trembled slightly. "Do you ever stop seeing them?" she asked. Lowe shook her head. "No, you just learn to let them pass through." Outside, cicadas screamed in the trees. The air was thick, the world too alive for what they were talking about. When Lowe drove home that night, she couldn't shake the unease. Something in Marjorie's tone had felt unfinished, as if she knew a truth that hadn't been spoken. At the office, Lowe reopened her notes, not because of doubt, but because habit is stronger than relief. She read every page again. The timeline, the phone data, the autopsy. Everything fit, but one line from the old report caught her eye. Unknown partial print on vehicle door handle, insufficient for match. It had never been identified. Not Dalton's, not Allison's, not anyone's. She told herself it didn't matter. Partial prints mean nothing after decades. But the thought gnawed at her. In prison, Dalton began writing letters, short, uneven handwriting addressed to no one. Guards collected them from his cell and passed them to the warden. Most were scripture. Some were fragments. One read, "The ditch wasn't my choice." Another, "He was there too." When Lowe heard about the letters, she drove to the prison. The warden handed her a small stack. She read them in the visitor's room under harsh fluorescent light. The words were disjointed, half confession, half hallucination. But one line chilled her. She ran toward the lights. I followed. Then he came from the dark. Lowe frowned. She whispered. She asked to see Dalton. The warden hesitated, then nodded. In the interview room, he looked older eyes, sunken skin, pale from months without sun. She placed the letters on the table between them. "Who's he, Michael? Who's he?" Dalton smiled faintly. "You already have your monster," he said. "Why go looking for another?" "I need the truth," she replied. He leaned closer. "Truth. The truth changes every time someone tells it." Lowe held his gaze. "Did someone else help you?" Dalton's smile faded. "Help me." He laughed softly, a sound like breaking glass. "No one helps anyone. Not really." He refused to speak further. Guards led him away. Lowe sat there, heart pounding. She knew delusion when she heard it, but something in his tone didn't sound like madness. It sounded like memory. That night, she reopened the archive once more. She studied every photo from the scene, zooming in on the background light, reflections, faint shapes in the dark. On one print behind the blurred outline of Dalton's truck was a second shadow, taller, slimmer, unidentified. Maybe nothing, maybe everything. She pushed the thought aside. The file was closed, the case solved. But the mind doesn't always obey paperwork. Weeks later, a letter arrived at her desk with no return address. Inside was a single Polaroid, the same stretch of road where Allison had been found, taken recently, a fresh tire track cut through the dirt. On the back, in shaky handwriting, not the only one. No fingerprints, no DNA. Just the photo and the same sense of dread she'd felt the morning the case reopened. Lova didn't tell the press. She filed the photo in a sealed envelope and locked it away. In Palm County, storms rolled in again, thunder muttering across the coastline. The road where Allison had died flooded every summer. Locals called it Ghost Mile now. Some said they saw lights there at night, heard footsteps in the rain. Most didn't go near it. In his cell, Dalton's health declined. He stopped eating. The prison doctor wrote severe insomnia, recurring hallucinations. The chaplain said he woke screaming, calling a name they couldn't make out. One morning, the guard found him slumped against the wall, breathing shallowly, a small scrap of paper clutched in his hand. It read, "He's still out there. He's still. He survived. Barely." When Luva heard she drove north again, sat outside the prison hospital, watching the sun rise behind the razor wire. She whispered, "You said it was over." No one answered. Later that month, a maintenance crew clearing brush near the old storage lot unearthed something metallic, half buried in the soil, a rusted flashlight wrapped in cloth. Inside the cloth were faint traces of blood. Lab tests confirmed the DNA female, not Allison's. Unknown. The sheriff called Lowe. Could be nothing, he said. Could be old evidence dumped nearby. Lowe stared at the report for a long time. Unknown female, not Allison. A chill crawled through her chest. That night, she sat at her desk, the hum of the ceiling fan, the only sound. She placed the new report beside the Polaroid, marked, "Not the only one." The words lined up in her mind like puzzle pieces. She thought of Dalton's whisper in the courtroom, of the smile that wasn't guilt, but fear. Maybe he hadn't been protecting himself. Maybe he'd been protecting someone else. Outside, thunder cracked again, lightning washing the world in white for half a second. Lowe whispered almost to herself, "The cold case isn't over." She looked at the folder on her desk, the one marked closed. Her hand hovered above it. Then, slowly, deliberately, she crossed out the word in red ink and wrote a single new one beneath it. Reopen. The fan kept spinning. The storm kept rolling. And somewhere beyond the rain, on that lonely Florida road, the dark kept its secrets for one night longer. The rain never really stopped in Palm County. It only changed its rhythm. Sometimes a whisper against glass, sometimes a steady drum that swallowed every other sound. On nights like this, Detective Lowe sat alone in her office, the case file spread open like a wound that refused to close. The word reopen glared back at her in red ink. The new evidence was small. One rusted flashlight, one scrap of cloth, one strand of DNA that didn't belong to Allison Parker. Female, unknown, but small things she knew could break open worlds. She turned the flashlight over in her hands. Soil still clung to its seams, 27 years underground, and it had somehow found its way back into the light. "What are you trying to tell me?" she whispered. Across the hall, the hum of vending machines filled the silence. The cold case unit had been reduced to 3 people, now budget cuts, new leadership. The sheriff had warned her, "Lo, the Dalton case is closed. Don't start chasing ghosts." But ghosts, she thought, were all she ever chased. She sent the new DNA sample to the state lab. It would take weeks. Waiting was the worst part. It let the imagination run wild. So she didn't wait. She started digging. The storage lot where the flashlight was found had been abandoned since 2001. But property records revealed something odd between 1995 and 1998. It was owned by a small logistics company called Sunfield Freight, the same company that had occasionally contracted with Dalton Construction. She felt the chill creep in. Loa drove out to the site the next morning. The air smelled of rust and wet grass. Metal skeletons of old trailers littered the field. She parked, stepped into the mud flashlight in one hand, camera in the other. The wind hissed through broken siding. Something rattled inside a container. When she pushed the door open, dust swirled like smoke. A single wooden pallet lay in the corner. On it, faded letters, spray-painted years ago, SF98 and 07. Sunfield Freight, July 1998. Her pulse quickened. That was 4 months after Allison's murder, when Dalton was already gone from Florida. But if the DNA wasn't hers, who else had been here? She called the lab to check missing person reports from that summer. 3 names matched the county time frame. 2 were cleared. The third stopped her cold. Rachel Devereaux, 23, last seen leaving a gas station 20 miles north of the same highway. No body, no suspect. Case dormant since 1999. Loa printed Rachel's photo. Dark hair, bright eyes, a small scar above her lip. She pinned it beside Allison's. Different faces, same quiet confidence. Something about the 2 images together looked wrong, like halves of the same sentence. Back at headquarters, she dug through the old Devereaux file. The original detective had noted a tip about a man in a construction truck seen near the station that night. The plate was never confirmed. Dalton's truck had matched that description. Coincidence or connection? Her mind began stitching timelines. Dalton arrested in 2023 for the Parker murder. But what if the Parker case had only been the beginning, or worse, the wrong beginning? She didn't tell anyone yet. Not the sheriff, not the DA. She needed proof. That night, unable to sleep, she returned to the office. The hum of the ceiling fan, the glow of her desk lamp, the walls lined with faces of the dead. The air tasted of dust and caffeine. She replayed the prison interview in her head. Dalton's words, he came from the dark. She'd assumed it was madness. But what if it wasn't? What if there really was someone else there that night? She opened the Polaroid again, the one that arrived anonymously, showing the road where Allison had died. In the reflection of a puddle, almost invisible unless you tilted the photo under light, there was the faint outline of a figure. Not Dalton. Taller, thinner, standing farther back. Her heart skipped. She scanned the image, enhanced the contrast on her monitor. The silhouette sharpened just enough to make her doubt everything. At 2 a.m. the lab called. The new DNA had processed. Female mid-20s, the analyst said. But here's the strange part. Partial match to the Dalton family tree. Lowe's throat went dry. You mean related? Likely. Could be sibling cousin niece. We're running extended genealogy now. She hung up, staring at the phone. A relative. She pulled up Dalton's old family chart from the genetic genealogy file. Dozens of names, but one stood out. Catherine Dalton, younger sister, born 1975, arrest record possession, petty theft, last known address, Gainesville, Florida. Disappeared in late 1998. No one had looked for her since. Lova whispered, "Oh God." She called the Tennessee Department of Corrections Michael Dalton's intake forms from 2023. Under next of kin, the line read simply deceased Catherine Dalton. But there was no death certificate, no record of burial, nothing. The unknown female DNA, the missing sister, the flashlight in the soil. Lowe's pulse thundered in her ears. She reopened the digital evidence from Allison's case, the soil samples from the ditch. In the chemical trace report was something she'd missed before 2 distinct blood types, only one confirmed as Allison's. The second had been too degraded for analysis. She stared at the screen, whispering, "It's her." The realization spread through her like frost. The next day, she drove to the prison. Dalton was in the infirmary, hooked to IV's, eyes glazed. When he saw her, he smiled weakly. "You found her, didn't you?" he rasped. Lowe's voice shook. "Your sister." He nodded once, almost peacefully. "She was there that night. You think I killed them both?" "I didn't." "Then who did?" His gaze drifted to the window. She wanted to help. She said we'd scare her a little, make her listen. But something went wrong. Allison fought back. Catherine panicked. He coughed, voice breaking. "I tried to stop her." Lowe felt the room tilt. "You're saying your sister killed Allison Parker?" He closed his eyes. "She didn't mean to. We buried her near the lot a week later. I told her to run, but she never made it far." Lowe froze. "You buried who?" Dalton's lips trembled. "Catherine. She wouldn't stop crying." The guard signaled the end of the visit. As they led him away, Dalton turned back one last time. "You wanted truth," he said softly. "There it is. 2 ghosts, 1 grave." Lova sat motionless long after he was gone. Her hands shook. 2 victims. 2 stories tangled into one. She drove straight to the storage lot again, headlights cutting through the mist. The rain had started up relentless. She walked to the patch of ground where the flashlight had been found, knelt in the mud, and pressed her palm against the earth. "This isn't over," she whispered. Within hours, a forensic crew was on site. They dug until dawn. At 5:47 a.m., a gloved hand lifted something from the soil bone fragments, small and delicate, wrapped in decayed cloth. Human remains. The medical examiner confirmed it the next day. The DNA matched the Dalton lineage. Catherine Dalton, missing since 1998, found in the same field as the evidence that solved her brother's case. When Luva heard, she didn't speak. She simply sat staring at the rain sliding down the window pane. The sheriff wanted to call it coincidence to close both files together, one family tragedy bound by madness. But Luva knew better. In the Polaroid's reflection, there had been 2 figures, Dalton and someone taller, someone still unseen. She replayed his last words. She ran toward the lights. Then he came from the dark. There was still a he. And as the storm broke again over Florida, Detective Lowe realized she hadn't solved the case. She'd only opened the door to another one. Dawn broke through a sheet of fog, the kind of Florida light that makes everything look washed out, unfinished. The excavation site behind the storage lot was now a graveyard of blue tarps and evidence flags. Forensic teams moved slowly, deliberate, as if afraid to wake what they were unearthing. Detective Lowe stood at the perimeter, mud on her boots, eyes hollow from 36 hours without sleep. They had Catherine Dalton's remains. That much was fact. But what lingered beyond fact was harder to grasp, another presence, another name that kept circling the edges of every lead. He came from the dark. Lowe replayed Michael Dalton's words in her head. They didn't sound like metaphor anymore. They sounded like warning. The sheriff wanted closure. "We've got both of them accounted for," he said. "Brother-sister tragedy, let's call it." Lowe didn't answer. She was staring at the ground where the second set of tire tracks cut across the mud, too fresh for something left by investigators. "Somebody's been here," she murmured. The sheriff frowned. "We locked this place down yesterday. Then they came before dawn." She knelt, tracing the pattern with her glove. Different tread, deeper groove, heavy vehicle pickup or van. It led straight to the service road, then vanished into the marsh. Whoever it was, they knew the site. By noon, the lab confirmed something stranger fibers found near Catherine's body didn't match any known Dalton belongings. They were synthetic industrial grade used in old work gloves from construction suppliers that went out of business 20 years ago. Lowe pulled the invoices from 1998. One name appeared on every shipment, Sunfield Freight Maintenance, signed by a foreman named Harlan Reese. Reese. The name rang faintly in her memory. She dug through Allison Parker's original witness statements. There it was, scribbled in the margin of a diner log, truck hash 42 Reese. He had overseen the resurfacing job the month before Allison's death. His address, handwritten on a line below, had long been crossed out. He'd vanished in 1999. No forwarding contact, no tax filings, no death certificate. Loa felt a chill slide down her spine. That night, she drove north, the rain chasing her headlights. The address led to an abandoned trailer park outside Ocala, a line of rusted homes and empty mailboxes half swallowed by weeds. Reese's trailer still stood door-padlocked windows, black with mildew. She pried it open. Inside, the air reeked of dust and gasoline. On the table sat a single object untouched by time, a Polaroid camera. Her pulse quickened. She flipped through the drawers, receipts, tools, old film cartridges, and then tucked behind a cabinet a small box wrapped in duct tape. Inside, photographs. Dozens of them. Women. Different ages, different faces. Most smiling, unaware of the lens. One photo made her freeze Allison Parker outside the diner, laughing with a coworker. Another Catherine Dalton standing near a pickup, her eyes wary. A low hum filled her ears. The room seemed to tilt. She spread the photos across the table patterns, forming same background in several shots, the storage lot. And in the corner of one frame, a partial reflection in a truck mirror. Broad shoulders, baseball cap, eyes just visible. Harlan Reese. The realization hit like cold water. Dalton hadn't lied. There was another man there. Maybe the one who'd taught him. Maybe the one who'd ended them both. Lowe gathered the evidence, heart pounding. Outside, thunder rolled across the flats. Back at headquarters, the sheriff listened in silence as she laid the photos on his desk. "You're telling me we convicted the wrong killer?" "No," she said. "We caught one. The other's still breathing." They issued a quiet warrant for Reese, assuming he might still be alive under another name. DMV records, tax IDs, employment rolls, nothing. But when the tech unit ran a reverse search on the Polaroid camera's serial number, it traced to a pawn shop registered in 2016 under a new owner. The purchaser, Harold R. Easton. A fake name maybe, but the initials matched. They pulled surveillance from the shop. The footage was grainy, time-stamped, late evening. A man in his 50s, heavy-set baseball cap, pulled low. He looked up once directly into the camera. Lowe's stomach clenched. She printed the still, placed it beside the reflection from the 1998 photo. Same jawline, same scar under the eye. He was alive. For the first time in months, adrenaline cut through her exhaustion. She could almost feel the case breathing again, dragging her deeper. The next day, she drove to the address tied to the purchase, an isolated workshop near the Suwannee River. No backup, just instinct. The sky was a bruise of gray wind, heavy with rain. The building was quiet. Tools hung neatly on the wall. A radio played softly in the corner, old country music slightly warped. She moved through the shadows, gun drawn. On a workbench, another camera. Next to it, a stack of photographs. The top one was of her. Her breath caught. The picture showed her car outside the sheriff's office, taken days ago. A voice behind her. "You shouldn't have come alone." She turned. A man stood in the doorway, older now, face-weathered, but unmistakable Harlan Reese. His hands were empty, but his eyes were sharp, calculating. "You people never learn," he said. "You dig long enough, you start finding your own graves." "Put your hands where I can see them," Lova ordered. He smiled. "You think you know what happened back then. Dalton was a fool. His sister worse. They wanted to play games, scare a girl. I just finished what they started." Lowe felt her throat tighten. "You killed them both?" He stepped closer, slow. "Not both. She came back, tried to stop me. Didn't work." The words hit her like a blow. "Catherine." He nodded. She screamed like her brother. Lightning flashed outside, lighting his face, cold, proud, unrepentant. Lova raised her gun. "You're done, Reese." He laughed low and rasping. "You think prison scares me? I've been buried once already." He lunged. She fired. The shot cracked through the storm, echoing across the field. When the deputies arrived minutes later, they found Reese on the floor, bleeding but alive. Lova stood against the wall, rain soaking through the open door, her gun still trembling in her hand. As paramedics worked, she turned toward the workbench. The photos were gone. Only one remained face down. She flipped it over. A Polaroid of the road where it had all begun, fresh tire tracks, a shadow in the distance, watching. Her reflection trembled in the glossy surface. Back at the station as Reese lay in custody, he refused to speak. But one phrase repeated over and over in his cell, whispered through cracked lips. "He told me she'd come looking." When Lowe heard a shiver ran through her. Dalton had warned her too. He came from the dark. Now the darkness had a face. But somewhere beyond the river, beyond the storm, there were still tracks she hadn't followed and a figure in a photo that shouldn't exist. Justice, she realized, was never clean. It dripped, it bled, it whispered. And even as one monster fell, another waited in the wings unseen. As night settled over Palm County again, the lights of the sheriff's office flickered against the rain-streaked windows. Lowe sat alone, the new evidence spread before her, the words from every case echoing through her mind like a prayer she no longer believed in. Cold cases don't die. They just change names. The storm broke at dawn. Sheets of rain still clung to the streets, and the sky glowed faintly orange behind the courthouse. News vans lined the sidewalk, reporters rehearsing their words as police escorted Harlan Reese inside. Handcuffed, face, pale eyes, blank. To the cameras, he looked like every monster they'd ever imagined, an aging man swallowed by the weight of his crimes. But to Detective Lowe, watching from the window upstairs, he looked ordinary. That was what scared her most. In the interrogation room, the air was cold and stale. Reese sat across from her hands, folded a faint smile at the corner of his mouth. Between them lay a single file, the photographs from his workshop, the receipts, the fingerprints lifted from the Polaroid camera. Lova broke the silence. "You were there that night?" Reese tilted his head. "Which night?" "All of them," she said. "All the ones that ended in the dark." He chuckled softly. "You sound like him." "Dalton." He nodded. "He thought you people would never dig deep enough. He thought you'd stop at the easy answer. But you kept digging. That's what ruins everything you people don't know when to stop." Lowe leaned forward. "You killed Allison Parker. You killed Catherine Dalton. And you let an innocent man rot in his own guilt for 25 years. Reese's eyes narrowed. Innocent. The word hung between them like static. "You think your killer was born in that ditch," he said. "He was made there. You just never wanted to see who built him." He turned his gaze to the mirrored glass. "How's your conscience, detective?" Lowe didn't flinch, but something inside her twisted. He was playing the same game every predator did, turning the light back on her. She'd seen it 100 times, but never this close. Outside, the building buzzed with reporters and cameras. The DA's office scrambled to rewrite their press releases. New suspect in 1998, Florida, cold case arrested. Forensics rushed to test the tools from Reese's workshop. Each hammer, each rope fiber, each fragment of earth. The DNA was conclusive. Reese's genetic profile matched the unknown samples on both victims, but it didn't end there. The soil on his boots held traces of a third DNA source. Female, unknown, not Allison, not Catherine, someone else. Lowe stared at the lab report, the words swimming on the page. A third woman. She drove home that night under a low, heavy sky. The rain had finally stopped, but the road still shimmered under the glow of passing headlights. She hadn't slept in days. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Flash's mud rope the glint of the Polaroid camera. At home, the walls felt too close. She poured a glass of water, hands trembling, and sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by silence. Her recorder sat where she'd left it, half a dozen case notes still untranscribed. She pressed play. He said she ran toward the lights. He came from the dark. Her own voice echoed back through the static. Then faintly something else, another sound under her words. A man's breath. She froze. Rewound. Played again. The faint inhale, the click of a camera shutter. That wasn't on the original tape. Her heart hammered. She checked the device's timestamp. The file had been opened that afternoon, hours after she'd left it in her locked office. She grabbed her phone, called the station. "Did anyone access my desk today?" "Not that we know of," the clerk said. "Why?" "Just check the security feed." But when the footage came back, the feed from her office camera was black. 37 minutes missing. She didn't go back to sleep. She packed a bag, loaded her sidearm, and returned to the precinct before sunrise. Reese was still in custody, guarded and silent. When she entered the observation room, he looked up, almost expectant. "You brought it with you," he said softly. Loa froze. "Brought what?" He smiled. "The sound. It's his favorite part." "Whose?" she demanded. Reese leaned forward, eyes glinting. "You still think it's just us?" The guard stepped closer, uneasy. "Detective, maybe." Reese slammed his cuffed hands on the table. "You don't get it. He's been watching you." The room erupted. The guard restrained him as Reese screamed, his voice ragged. "He takes pictures just like me." "You already met him. You just didn't look close enough." They sedated him. Lowe stood frozen, pulse racing, trying to make sense of it. Another man, another set of eyes behind the camera. Back in the evidence room, she reviewed every recovered Polaroid again. The diner, the field, the road. She studied the angles, the lighting, the distances. Each shot was too clean, too composed. Then she noticed something. Each one bore a faint reflection of a second flash. 2 photographers. Her stomach turned. She called the lab, demanded every fingerprint re-examined. Hours later, the analyst called back. "Detective, we found a partial print on one of the Polaroids. Doesn't match Reese or Dalton." "Then who?" "We're running it through the state system now." Love awaited, pacing a corridor. The station hummed with noise, phones, chatter, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Then the analyst appeared, holding a printout, face pale. "Detective, it matches a current officer." Her breath caught. "Who?" He hesitated. "Sheriff Warren." The room tilted. Loa felt the air leave her lungs. For years, Warren had been her mentor. The man who'd brought her onto the cold case task force, the one who told her not to chase ghosts. He had been at every scene, every discovery, every step of the way. It couldn't be him. It shouldn't be. She drove to his house without calling backup, her headlights cutting through fog. The front porch light was on the screen door ajar. Inside, the smell of bleach hit her. The living room was empty except for a camera bag on the table inside Polaroids. Dozens, not just the victims. Loa, too, walking to her car, sitting at her desk, standing by the ditch road last week. Her knees almost gave out. A floorboard creaked behind her. "Loa," a voice said softly, "you should have stopped when I told you to." She turned. Sheriff Warren stood in the doorway, gun drawn, eyes calm. "I didn't want it to end this way." "Why?" she whispered. He sighed. "Because I made the first mistake. I covered Dalton's tracks. The department needed a clean story, but Reese wouldn't let it die. So I fed him victims' women who fit the same type. He thought he was finishing what Dalton started." Lowe's mind reeled. "You helped him." "I managed him," he said. "Until you reopened the file?" He raised the gun slightly. "You were supposed to be smarter than this." Her fingers brushed the holster at her side. "Put it down, Warren." He smiled, sadly. "You never understood. Some cases aren't meant to be solved. They're meant to stay buried." The next sound was thunder or maybe the gunshot. The scene shattered in a single flash. When the backup arrived 10 minutes later, they found Lowe standing in the living room, hands trembling, Warren on the floor, the Polaroids scattered across the tile like fallen ghosts. Outside, sirens painted the night red and blue. Reporters would call it justice. The department would call it tragedy. But Lowe knew what it really was, a cycle that had been repeating for 27 years, each generation inheriting the sins of the last. As dawn crept over Palm County, she walked out into the wet grass, the air heavy with silence. The headlines were already being written. Florida cold case ends in bloody confrontation. Detective kills sheriff in explosive twist. But in her chest, the same question kept echoing, hollow and endless. If justice never ends, was it ever justice at all? Rain again. It seemed every ending in Palm County came with rain. The courthouse steps gleamed under the storm as news crews shouted through the downpour. Detective Lowe suspended pending investigation. Sheriff Warren dead after internal shooting. Cameras caught every flash of her face, every moment she refused to speak. Inside the department, silence replaced sirens. Her desk sat empty, badge sealed in an evidence bag. The board that once held the Parker file was cleared overnight. Photos stripped, pins gone thread snipped like veins. The sheriff's nameplate was already removed from his office door. They called it an officer-involved incident. They called her unstable. The Bureau's investigators filled the halls, their suits too dry for this city. They asked the same questions in different words. Why were you there alone? Did he threaten you first? How many rounds fired? Lowe answered each one without flinching. Because I followed the evidence? Because he was armed? Because I'm still alive. But inside, the words echoed against a hollow she couldn't fill. She hadn't slept in 3 days. Every time her eyes closed, she saw the flash, the light that wasn't lightning, the split second when the gun jerked in her hand. Sometimes she remembered his smile before he fell. Sometimes she wasn't sure it had been there at all. The Bureau sealed Warren's house as a crime scene. Forensics cataloged hundreds of Polaroids, 2 cameras, several boxes of undeveloped film. In one roll, still drying under the red lamp, they found the last image he'd taken, a woman standing on a rainy street camera in hand eyes, half shadowed. The timestamp read 12 hours before the shooting. The woman was Lova. The DA called it fixation. She called it proof. The department wanted distance. They issued a statement calling Warren a rogue officer acting independently, framing Lowe as the reluctant hero who stopped him. But the media didn't buy it. They wanted motive, corruption, conspiracy. They dug through old case logs, old photographs, even old payrolls. That's when someone noticed a pattern. 5 cold case files reopened under Warren's supervision, all with missing women, all with Polaroids later appearing in evidence boxes that were never logged. The trail went back to 1995. Lowe watched it unfold on the evening news, her own face blurred behind grainy footage. She turned off the television and stared at the reflection in the black screen. The reflection stared back like someone she used to be. She poured coffee that tasted of metal, sat at the table covered in her own notes. The walls of her apartment had become another evidence board. Strings of yarn photographs, circles drawn in red ink. But this time, every photo led back to the same center her. The bullet casing from Warren's gun lay sealed in a plastic bag beside her notebook. The forensics team said both guns fired within half a second. No one could tell who shot first. Outside, the storm faded to drizzle. Somewhere, a dog barked, then stopped. The world felt too quiet. When she finally slept, it wasn't peace. In the dream, the roads stretched endless beneath the orange glow of streetlights. Allison stood on the shoulder, her diner uniform soaked through, eyes glassy but alive. Beside her, Catherine Dalton, half buried in mud. And behind them both, Warren holding the Polaroid camera. He lifted it. The flash exploded. Lowe woke, gasping hand reaching for the gun that wasn't there anymore. Sweat clung to her skin. The room felt smaller. On the nightstand, her phone buzzed a number she didn't recognize. When she answered, the line hissed with static, then a voice she hadn't heard since the hospital. "Detective Lowe." It was Michael Dalton. Her throat tightened. "You're not supposed to contact me." "I know," he said. His voice was weak, slow. "They told me about Warren, about the photos. What do you want?" He paused. "To tell you something before I die. He wasn't alone." She sat up. "Reese is dead. Warren's dead." "Not them," Dalton interrupted. "Someone else. He came after us that night. I thought it was over, but he took pictures even then. Check the negatives. You'll see him." The line cut out. Lowe sat frozen phone pressed to her ear, rain tapping against the window. The negatives. She grabbed her keys, drove straight to the evidence lab, heart pounding. The technician on duty looked startled as she entered. "Detective, you're not cleared. Just show me Warren's undeveloped rolls," she said. Under the red glow of the dark room, strips of film hung drying. She held one up to the light, squinting. Frame after frame, crime scenes, faces, bodies, herself. Then, in the last strip, an image half burned by exposure, a silhouette standing behind Warren, camera in hand. Not Dalton, not Reese, not her. Someone else. She leaned closer. The figure's posture was familiar. Broad shoulders, same tilt of the head she'd seen once before in a reflection from the ditch road. Her blood ran cold. The technician frowned. "You okay, detective?" Lowe didn't answer. She pulled out her phone, scrolling through archived reports. There it was, a name she hadn't spoken aloud in years. Detective Mark Ellison, the original investigator from 1998. Retired? He'd been the first to reach the crime scene. The man who called it too clean. The man who'd handed her the file 25 years later and said, "Find what I missed." She whispered, "Oh God." She found his address in the old personnel log coastal house near St. Augustine, isolated, surrounded by marsh. By the time she reached it, night had swallowed the highway. The wind carried the scent of salt and rain. The house was dark windows, shuttered. She knocked once, no answer. Twice. Then the door opened. Ellison stood there, gray hair slicked back, eyes sharp, despite the years. "I wondered when you'd come," he said. Lowe's hand hovered near her holster. "You were there, weren't you?" He sighed. "Warren was supposed to keep it quiet. He never could. You helped them cover it up." "I helped stop it," Ellison said. "But you kept digging, and now everything we buried is awake again." He stepped aside, motioning her in. On the wall behind him hung photographs, dozens, maybe hundreds. Not Polaroids, prints, Allison, Catherine, Reese, Warren. And in the center, a single empty frame. "For you," he said. Lowe's breath caught. He smiled faintly. "You did good work, detective, but this story doesn't end. It only changes narrators." He raised a camera. The flash ignited the room white. The report would later say there was one gunshot, maybe two. Neighbors heard shouting a woman's voice, then silence. By morning, the house was empty. The rain had stopped. On the table inside sat a camera. The film inside held only one picture, an open road under gray sky. No people, no blood, just light breaking through the clouds. In the evidence log, it was tagged simply as unknown image recovered from scene. But the technicians swore when they looked close enough at the horizon, they saw a faint figure walking away. The first patrol reached the house just after sunrise. Mist rolled off the marsh, soft and colorless, wrapping the scene in a hush that felt deliberate. The door stood open, curtains breathing in and out with the wind. Detective Lowe's car was parked crooked in the gravel drive, driver's door ajar, engine cold. Inside, everything smelled of salt and old film developer. A single camera sat on the table, still warm from use. The flash unit was cracked, a small smear of blood on the lens. No body, no footprints leaving the porch. Only the sound of water dripping through the broken roof like a clock marking seconds that no longer mattered. Crime scene techs moved in silence. They found the bullet lodged in the far wall, a streak of copper and plaster, but no shell casing, no gun. The prints on the camera belonged to Lowe and Mark Ellison, and one partial unidentified. By noon, the Bureau had taken over. The headlines wrote themselves, "Detective Missing After Confrontation with Retired Officer. Florida Cold Case Hero Vanishes in Mystery Shootout." At headquarters, the mood was equal parts disbelief and exhaustion. Officers whispered in the hallways. Reporters crowded the steps outside, rain slicking their microphones. The press wanted resolution. The department wanted distance. But the new chief, Captain Holloway, didn't believe in ghosts. He reopened the file one more time under a new name, the Lowe Incident. He called it a house of mirrors, every suspect reflecting another, every truth bouncing back distorted. Warren dead. Reese dead. Dalton dying in prison. Ellison missing, presumed armed, and now Lowe gone, leaving only a photograph no one could explain. On day 3, the forensic lab developed the roll recovered from Ellison's darkroom. 56 images. Half were crime scene reprints. A handful showed Luva during the investigation, candid angles, unaware she was being watched. But the last frame was different. A road under a low horizon, wet asphalt stretching into mist. When enlarged, a faint silhouette appeared at the vanishing point. Female mid-height walking away. The analyst swore it moved when you blinked. Holloway dismissed it as exposure blur. He ordered every inch of the marsh searched anyway. They found nothing. Meanwhile, the Bureau reconstructed Lowe's final 48 hours from phone logs, dashcam data surveillance feeds. At 21:17 p.m., she'd left her apartment. At 22:42, her vehicle passed mile marker 61, heading east. At 23:03, traffic cameras caught her pulling off Highway 17 toward the coast. After that, dark. Her phone pinged once more at 23:41 coordinates, placing it somewhere inside the marsh basin. Then silence. The divers went out at dawn. They found her recorder, first waterlogged but intact, wedged between reeds 20 yards from Ellison's deck. When technicians restored the file, they expected chaos gunfire screams. Instead, they heard calm. If anyone finds this, the story's still writing itself. He said every ending needs a witness. I think I finally understand what he meant. Cold cases don't die, they just wait for someone to follow. A pause, then the faint click of a camera shutter. Nothing after that. Forensics confirmed the voice was hers. The Bureau closed the official report a month later. Detective Lowe missing, presumed dead. Cause undetermined. Contributing factors: stress, psychological trauma, prolonged exposure to high-profile case. But off the record, no one believed she drowned. Some said she ran. Others whispered she was taken by whoever stood behind Ellison that night, the same unseen presence threaded through every Polaroid since 1998. In Palm County, the legend grew fast. Locals called it the photographer, a figure glimpsed on back roads after rainstorms, camera flash flickering once before the dark swallowed it again. Tourists left flowers at the ditch where Allison Parker died. A new sign warned of flooding, but people said at certain hours you could hear shutters clicking between the thunder. Months passed. Seasons changed. Then, almost exactly a year later, a plain envelope arrived at the sheriff's office. No return address, inside a single photo. A dirt road under gray sky. The same road, same horizon, and in the distance, a woman walking toward the camera. She wasn't looking back. Fingerprints inconclusive, paper dated recent. The lab said the image hadn't been printed, it was an original Polaroid developed within hours of being taken. Captain Holloway locked it in evidence and never spoke of it again. But the clerk who processed the envelope swore the postmark was stamped from St. Augustine Marsh, and she swore she recognized the handwriting on the back. Case open. At the next storm, lightning cracked across the coast and the county lost power for 7 minutes. When it came back, the surveillance camera outside the sheriff's office captured a brief flash white round like a bulb firing once. The timestamp matched the moment, The envelope was logged. Morning light slid over Palm County like the afterglow of a fire that had burned too long. The water on the roads had dried, but the smell of salt and ash still hung in the air. Inside the sheriff's archive, rows of cardboard boxes waited to be forgotten again. Labels faded tape yellowed. One box was newer, stamped across the lid in red low, unresolved. Captain Holloway stood over it, coffee cooling in his hand. A year had passed since the night she vanished. Officially, the Bureau had ruled it an accident, officer fatigue, disorientation in the marsh, presumed drowning. But unofficially, no one believed that story anymore. Not after the envelope. Not after the second photograph. It had arrived 2 weeks ago, identical Polaroid frame, same washed-out light. This time, the woman in the distance was closer, her outline clearer, her head tilted slightly, as if listening. The analysts said it was impossible the negative chemistry matched the previous print, exactly same roll, same batch, same exposure. Someone was still developing film from a camera seized the night she disappeared. Holloway sealed the photo back in evidence, signed the log, and left the room. The door clicked behind him. The hum of the lights filled the silence again, low and endless. At 11:03 a.m., the power flickered. A single bulb burst. The security feed caught it one white flash like lightning with nowhere to strike. The Bureau's final report stretched 212 pages. It documented every crime in a tone so sterile it almost erased them. But buried near the end between the appendices sat an audio transcript labeled Recovered Voice, fragment #07. And if justice is a story, then maybe it was never supposed to end. Maybe it just changes hands. You write the beginning, someone else writes the next page, and if you stop reading, the story keeps going without you. The voice was confirmed as Detective Lowe. The timestamp, 48 hours after her declared time of death. That winter, Palm County held a small memorial. No podium, no speeches. Just a framed badge and a single photograph of Lowe standing on the courthouse steps, rain blurring the edges of her smile. Allison Parker's mother came. So did a handful of officers who had once served under Warren. None of them spoke. After the ceremony, a maintenance worker cleaning the old evidence wing found something wedged behind a filing cabinet, a Polaroid. The colors were newer, brighter. It showed the courthouse from above, taken from somewhere high, impossible. The reflection of the flash streaked across the glass doors like a tear of light. On the back, in handwriting that matched Lowe's final report, notes 3 words: he's still watching. Weeks later, the legend returned. Drivers claimed they saw her on the old county road near the Marshall figure camera, glinting once before vanishing in the mist. Some said it was a ghost. Some said it was conscience. Others just the echo of a flashbulb burned into the air. Captain Holloway retired quietly that spring. The new sheriff ordered the Lowe file sealed for historical preservation. The label changed again, case status cold. And somewhere beyond the city limits, under the low clouds that never seemed to move, a shutter clicked. Once. The sound rolled down the highway like thunder chasing its own tail. Then, nothing. Just the hum of insects and the soft hiss of wind through the grass, carrying with it the memory of every name that was supposed to be forgotten. Because in Palm County, no case ever really closes. It only waits for light.